The CFA Charter takes more than 1,000 hours to complete. That's a long time, especially if you spend it worrying through the night, frantically reviewing your notes last minute before the exam, and then praying that you pass. So if you want to avoid that, then you want to avoid these 3 mistakes that I made. Let's go. So if you're new here, my name is Harris and I'm an investment banker and CFA charter holder who passed all 3 levels first time, scoring in the 90th percentile at all applicable levels. In today's video, as I said, I'm going to step through the 3 mistakes that I made that you want to avoid if you don't want the stress that I endured. Let's go. So the first mistake that I made was writing my own notes. Now, when I started the charter, as many do, I held the view, which is somewhat dated, that writing your notes helps you learn the material better, and I think it's something we develop at school. At that time, when I started, I was also getting into the sort of productivity hype. I was using Notion and Notability, and I found them super cool. And so I would type up the main notes on Notion, and then I bought an iPad, bought Notability, and then I was using an Apple Pen to write out the formulas and then integrating it with Notion, and I had a beautiful ecosystem of notes. But then I realized I wasn't actually paying any attention to the actual lecture. So when I got to the end of my studies, I realized that I didn't actually understand anything. So I had to go back through it anyway. And ultimately, I ended up doubling my study time, when in reality, I wasted a lot of it just regurgitating material. The central point here is you should focus on learning the material, not on writing. And the solution is therefore to buy your notes. And I've made a video on this and I'll link it on the screen in terms of what prep provider to use. That doesn't mean you can't make your own notes for parts of the curriculum. So the common objection is that people feel it helps them in terms of the mind-muscle connection or whatever it is. Ultimately, I think you can still do that. I actually agree. For formulaic stuff, you actually do want to write and derive the formula, and it helps establish that connection. But for the boilerplate language, the bulk of the content, you want that covered by essentially pre-made notes. And then you can make notes on the material that you find a little bit more challenging. And then you end up with a complete holistic set of notes that you can study from. But don't write them all from scratch. It's a huge waste of time. Just a quick note to say, if you've seen my other CFA videos and you like my content, consider hitting like and subscribe. I appreciate you. Let's keep going. Okay, the second mistake that I made was using the books. Now, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with using the books. It's just that they're far too detailed and there's very little direction as to what material is most testable. So the CFA is renowned for being an absolute mammoth. There's so much information, and frankly put, you're never going to know it all. And if you use the books as your primary source of study, you're actually going to get lost in the detail and honestly you drown. I remember when I started my studies, I opened up the book on chapter 1, page 1, which was ethics, and I started from there, and I spent the first few weeks sort of working through it. And then I bumped into a friend of mine who recently completed the CFA, and I was telling him about my approach, and he was like, what the hell are you doing? This is so inefficient and it's going to take you forever. So he recommended to me to get a solid prep provider and to go through the material in an optimal order as opposed to chronological. So ethics is not actually a good one to start with. It should be done later in the curriculum, and I covered that in other videos. But point being, he essentially highlighted to me that my approach to the curriculum was wrong. So the central point is that the books are fine, but they're better for specific deep dives. And otherwise, you should use a solid prep provider and approach the curriculum in an optimal order. And as I said, I covered that in other videos. Check them out. Okay, the final mistake that I made was approaching the questions wrong. Now, there are thousands of practice questions across the 3 levels, and simply put, you're not going to get them all right, especially without consulting your notes. So at level 1, there's something like 3 to 3,500 questions, and when I started doing them, I tried to approach them without consulting my notes. And when I inevitably got things wrong, I would get quite demoralized. I was sort of kicking myself, thinking, I'm never going to pass this exam. But in reality, you actually have to convert knowledge to application, and that takes time. And there's so many questions, and the objective is to use them to consolidate your learning as opposed to do them off the top of your head and get 100% in them. That's never going to happen. Don't worry about your scores essentially in the practice questions, particularly early days. And more than anything, you need time. You want to give yourself 1 to 2 months at least before the exam. Point on the mocks. Don't do them too early. They're a key resource and you don't want to waste them. They're essentially your only opportunity to do questions under time pressure, which mimics the exam. If you do them too early, you don't have that available to you at the end. That is going to go against you. You want that prep to get you in exam mode. So give yourself time to do the practice questions and then do the mocks right at the end in the last sort of couple of weeks. That's it. Those are the 3 mistakes that I made that you want to avoid if you want to increase efficiency and pass the exam. Now, if you like this, you're going to love these 2 videos where I went through how I crushed the CFA Charter with 90th percentile scores and whether it was worth it. So check them out, and otherwise see you in the next video.